Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. Tonight's story doesn't begin with a name. It doesn't begin with a job, a marriage, or a memory. It begins with her laugh, echoing across a rooftop I was never supposed to walk into. And it ends with a box full of things she thought I'd forgotten. The music wasn't loud enough to drown her out. Not her, not that laugh. I stood just inside the glass doors of the rooftop lounge, heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. And all I could hear, through clinking glasses and fake smiles, was her laugh. Light, flirtatious. A sound I used to chase like a moth to a flame. Now it scorched. She was standing near the edge of the terrace, wrapped in conversation with a man who clearly knew how to own a room. His posture was confident. His hand lingered a little too long on her arm. She leaned into it. That part hurt more than I thought it would. I didn't flinch. I didn't storm over or shout or make a scene. Instead, I walked calmly toward the back of the room, where the catering table ended and the shadows began, and set the box down on a small white-clothed cocktail table. It was plain, untaped, light enough to carry with one hand, but heavy with everything she'd buried, and then I waited. I didn't need long. She turned, probably to grab another glass of whatever she was pretending to sip, and her eyes locked on the box. That smile? It didn't fade. It collapsed. Her expression went from delight to dread in less than a second. The man next to her followed her gaze, confused, trying to understand what could possibly drain the color from her face so fast. But I wasn't looking at him. I was watching her, and I wish I could say I felt satisfaction, justice, something. But all I felt was the ache, the one that told me, this is the moment she realizes you were watching the whole time. She didn't run, she didn't speak. She just stared at that box like it was ticking. And maybe it was, because inside, I hadn't placed anything dramatic. No photos, no letters, no ring. Just one object, a small, half-burned candle in a glass jar, the one she lit every night while she FaceTimed him, thinking I was asleep in the next room. I didn't move after placing the box. I didn't need to. Her body betrayed her faster than words ever could. I stood just far enough away to be visible, but not confrontational. I wanted her to see me, really see me, not the version she had quietly rewritten in her mind, not the quiet man she thought would stay soft and silent no matter how loud her betrayal became. I wasn't that man anymore. I had walked into that rooftop with one goal, to make sure she understood that I knew, and not just knew, but remembered everything she thought I'd forgotten. She stood frozen, still holding the stem of her champagne glass like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The man next to her, I'd later learn his name was Carter, whispered something into her ear, probably trying to pull her back into the moment, back into the lie. But she didn't blink. Her gaze stayed fixed on the box like it might open itself and spill our entire marriage across that marble floor. It wasn't about revenge. If it had been, I would have made a scene. I would have waited until her laughter was at its loudest and dropped the box with a crash. But no, that's not who I am. That's not who I was raised to be. I wanted truth, not chaos. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices in complete silence, the kind that doesn't get drowned out by music or empty apologies. She finally walked toward me, cautiously, like I might explode. Her heels clicked against the tile, echoing louder than the music ever could. She didn't touch me. She didn't even try to smile. All she said was, "Thayer, what is this?" I tilted my head and replied calmly, "You'll want to open it later." Not here, not in front of him, I nodded in Carter's direction. "Unless you want him to understand what kind of woman he's sharing drinks with." Her lips parted, but no words came out. That was the moment she realized I wasn't playing by her script. I wasn't the apologetic husband she could manipulate. I wasn't going to be the one crying on the couch while she claimed it wasn't serious. I stepped back. "Don't follow me," I said, turning before she could protest. "Tonight isn't about answers. It's about consequences I left through the side door, the one marked staff only. I didn't care. I just needed air. I needed space to breathe again, something I hadn't done properly in months. Every day leading up to that moment had been torture, her late nights, her client calls that always ended with her phone flipped face down, the strange shifts in her tone, the coldness creeping in like a draft, no matter how tightly I tried to seal our windows. I had let it go, again and again, because I loved her. Or maybe I loved the version of her I thought still existed. But that night, on that rooftop, watching her try to pretend everything was fine while holding a glass of lies. That's when I stopped loving her, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Survival demands that kind of brutality sometimes. It was either keep loving a ghost or finally step into the storm. The candle in that box had burned half its life during her late-night calls with Carter. She didn't know I was awake. She didn't know I had counted every whisper. I didn't need proof. I needed her to remember who she used to be and what she traded it for. And now, with that box left behind, the rest of this story begins. That night after leaving the rooftop, I didn't go home. I couldn't. Not to the bed she'd turned cold, not to the couch that still smelled like her shampoo, the one she only used when she was trying to impress someone new. I drove for an hour with no destination, just the sound of my own heartbeat pounding through the silence of my car. I passed diners, gas stations, even the bridge we used to sit under on summer nights. Everything reminded me of a version of us that clearly only I was holding on to. I ended up at the city park, the one no one goes to after dark, and sat in the car with my fingers gripping the wheel until they turned white. And that's when I noticed something, her scarf, still on the passenger seat, but not the one she wore to work. This one had makeup on it, lipstick smudges, foundation marks, the kind you leave behind in a rush when you're changing into something meant for someone else. I stared at it like it had answers, but it just lay there, soft and silent, a discarded witness to something I hadn't been invited to see. I opened the glove compartment, not to snoop, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Inside was a receipt, one of those boutique valet services with the glossy logos, dated 3 weeks ago. A hotel, one she'd never mentioned. My stomach dropped. I had been in that car hundreds of times, driven her to work, to the doctor, to her friend Maya's baby shower, and yet, it was now the scene of a betrayal I hadn't yet fully uncovered. I took a photo of the receipt, folded it neatly, and placed it back exactly as I'd found it. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. That box had only been the beginning. Now I needed clarity. I needed to know how long she'd been rewriting our story without me. I needed to understand whether the woman I fell in love with still existed somewhere beneath the rehearsed apologies and curated lies. When I got home the next morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table. The box was beside her, open, its contents laid out like forensic evidence. Her hands were folded, her face pale, as if she had spent the entire night in the same position, waiting. She didn't say anything when I walked in. Not good morning, not I'm sorry, not even what do you want to know? Just silence. That kind of silence that only exists when two people realize they've become strangers under the same roof. I walked past her to the sink, poured myself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. Then, without turning around, I said, "You should have blown the candle out when you were done talking to him." Her breath caught, just a little. But I heard it, the smallest confirmation, and it shattered whatever thin hope I had left. She finally spoke, but the words came slowly. It wasn't supposed to be anything serious. The rage that rose in me was sharp, but I swallowed it. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to listen, really listen, to the lies she told herself to sleep at night. I turned around and met her eyes. "Is it still going on?" I asked, and for once I didn't flinch when she hesitated. She hesitated. That alone said everything. If there was one moment I'll remember until the end, it's that pause, not long enough to call out as guilt, but just wide enough to bury every truth we ever built. "No," she finally said, barely above a whisper. "It's over." Her voice was rehearsed, like she'd said those same 2 words to herself in the mirror before I walked in. But she couldn't look at me when she said them. Her fingers were twisting the hem of her sweater, her shoulders tight, her entire body rigid like a child waiting to be scolded. And the thing is, I didn't have the strength to yell. I just stood there, watching her, trying to decide if she had ever been honest with me, or if every part of our relationship had always been about control, silence, and her getting away with the little things. "What was his name?" I asked. I didn't want to know. I really didn't. But my brain needed pieces to complete the picture, something to anchor all the nights she came home late, the unexplained smiles after client calls, the way she'd recoil when I tried to touch her. "Carter," she said. The name hung in the air like smoke. I'd never met him, never even heard her mention him once. That's what made it worse. It hadn't just been physical. It had been hidden, protected. Something private enough to keep me permanently locked out. She started crying, and God help me. For a second I actually felt sorry for her. Not because I thought she deserved forgiveness, but because I remembered how it felt to love her. I remembered the version of her who danced barefoot in the kitchen, who left dumb, sticky notes on the fridge, who once told me I was her peace. That version was gone now, replaced by someone who held her lies so tightly that even now, even caught, she refused to admit their full weight. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her tears spilling freely now. It just happened." I almost laughed. It just happened, like traffic, like spilled coffee, like the weather. No, what happened was deliberate. Late-night messages, dinner reservations, hotel valet receipts, lipstick left behind in someone else's car. You don't accidentally betray someone for weeks, maybe months. You choose it, every single time. I pulled out the receipt I had photographed and set it gently beside the candle. "So, this hotel, was that nothing too?" She looked at it like it might catch fire. Her hands started to tremble. "It was once. Just once. And I ended it after. I swear, Thayer, I hated how much I wanted to believe her. Even then. Even when all the signs pointed to the opposite. I wanted her to say something that would undo the pain, rewind the time, give me a reason to forgive her, and not feel like an absolute fool for every sacrifice I made while she was building memories with someone else. But she stayed quiet, and I realized she was more afraid of losing control than she was of losing me. "You know what hurts?" I said, voice low. "It's not that you did it. It's that you came home every night and let me believe I still mattered." She tried to reach across the table, but I stepped back. For once, I wanted her to feel the space between us, not just emotionally, but physically. I wanted her to see what it looked like when someone starts unlearning love, when someone starts walking away, even if their feet haven't moved yet. After she tried to reach for me across the table and I stepped back, I went straight to the bedroom and closed the door behind me, not slamming it, not locking it, just shutting it quietly like I was sealing off a chapter. I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor for so long I lost track of time. Everything she said kept echoing in my head like a broken recording. It was just once. I ended it. It meant nothing. The thing about lies is, once they start to fall apart, they don't do it loudly. They just sort of dissolve, and you begin to notice what's missing, like how you can't remember the last time you felt their hand reach for yours without hesitation, or when their phone stopped ringing around you. And then I remembered something else. Her laptop. She'd never changed her password. She used the same one for years, even after all her apps began requiring facial recognition. I didn't want to check it, but part of me also needed to stop feeling like I was going insane. If she was telling the truth, if it had only been once, there would be nothing. One message, maybe two. But nothing ongoing. That's what I told myself. The moment the screen lit up and her inbox loaded, my stomach turned. It was like flipping on a light in a room you didn't know was filled with ghosts. Her emails with Carter didn't read like an affair that had ended. They read like a relationship that had been carefully compartmentalized, organized, labeled, hidden in plain sight. Messages about lunch breaks that ran long, a shared Dropbox folder labeled drafts. But inside were photo attachments. Some I wish I could unsee. Others were even worse. They were emotional. The kind of messages you don't send if someone meant nothing. One email from 3 days ago began with, "I still think about that night every time I wear those heels." Another ended with, "He's still clueless, bless his heart." That one nearly broke me. Clueless. That's what I was to her. Not a person, not a husband. Just some dim background character too naive to notice his own wife slipping out of frame. She had been feeding me carefully measured affection while pouring herself into someone else. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just sat there, still, staring at the screen while my entire world shifted beneath me. Eventually, I heard her knock. Quiet, like she was hoping I wouldn't answer. "Thayer," she said through the door. "Can I please come in?" I didn't respond. I wanted her to sit in it, just for a minute, to feel what it was like to want something you couldn't just walk into anymore. She knocked again. "Please, just talk to me." I closed the laptop and stood, opened the door slowly. She looked small, like someone who used to be taller but had been shrinking for years without noticing. "Why are you really sorry?" I asked her, looking straight into her eyes. Because I found out, or because you had to stop? She didn't answer, and that was the real answer. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark beside her, staring at the ceiling, while she breathed steadily like someone who had practiced looking innocent, even in unconsciousness. I wondered if she even realized what she'd done to me, if the guilt she claimed to feel was real, or just her reaction to getting caught. She didn't try to touch me, not once. No reaching for my hand, no shifting closer. Maybe she knew better. Maybe she knew that something unspoken had settled between us, something too heavy to be ignored anymore. At around 3 a.m., I got up, walked barefoot through the apartment, and sat on the living room floor like I used to when we first moved in and didn't own much furniture. Back then, she would bring over 2 mugs of tea and we'd sit cross-legged like kids, laughing about how broke we were, how we'd make it all work. Now the only thing she'd brought into that room recently was silence. I don't know what made me check her phone. Maybe I was chasing pain, or maybe I still held on to a thread of hope that I was wrong, that the messages I read on her laptop weren't the whole story. Her phone wasn't locked. That was her way of acting like she had nothing to hide. Leave the door open and hope no one looks inside. I went to her voicemail app. There were several deleted messages, but not permanently gone. And one of them had Carter's name on it. I played it. Her voice came through low and laughing, recorded late at night. You left your cufflink in my car again. I should start a collection. Maybe next time you can forget your tie too. Or just wear nothing at all. There was a pause, then a softer voice. I hate how quickly the hours pass when I'm with you. I feel real, like I can finally breathe. I pressed stop. There it was. Not lust, not a mistake, but a version of her that had felt more alive in his presence than in mine. I sat frozen, phone still in my hand, staring at the floor while the voicemail replayed in my mind. That was the moment I realized I had already disappeared from her story a long time ago. I had become a shadow, a background figure in her life who existed to pay bills, fix things around the apartment, and ask questions she never answered. She stirred in the bedroom a little after dawn. I heard the creak of the mattress, then silence again. When she walked out and saw me on the floor, she paused. Did you sleep out here? I looked up slowly. No, I said. I didn't sleep at all. She crossed her arms, defensive already. That was her pattern. Guilt, then distance, then justification. Thayer, what are we even doing? If you can't forgive me, if you're going to keep going through my things, maybe we should just end it, I cut in. She didn't answer. I stood up, calmer than I expected to be. I found the voicemail. You said you felt real with him, that you could breathe. She froze. I waited for the lie, for the denial, for some desperate half-truth to shield herself. But she just sank into the couch and buried her face in her hands. I didn't yell. I didn't ask more questions. I just walked into the bedroom, pulled out a small duffel bag, and started packing. Not everything, just what I needed. A toothbrush, a few shirts, my old hoodie. I wasn't leaving for good, not yet. But I was leaving for now. Because the man I used to be in this apartment, the one who trusted her completely, who believed her laugh was his, that man didn't exist anymore. I didn't leave a note. I didn't slam the door. I just left, quietly, with my bag and my silence. It was still early, the kind of pale morning where everything looks softer than it feels. I drove for half an hour without knowing where I was going until I passed one of those anonymous roadside hotels, the kind with dim yellow signage and thick curtains made to block out the world. It was perfect. I didn't need luxury. I needed invisibility, a place where no one asked questions, especially not me. I checked in using my middle name. It felt ridiculous at first, but something about it gave me comfort, like I was becoming someone else, even just for a night. The room smelled faintly of bleach and desperation. One bed, one chair, and a desk that had been scuffed by 1,000 strangers. I set my bag down and sat on the edge of the bed, not knowing what to do next. I was free, technically, but the kind of freedom you don't feel when your chest is still full of knots. I stared at the wall for what felt like hours until hunger forced me out. I went to the vending machine down the hall and got a bag of trail mix and a bottle of water. I ate like I was in hiding, like even chewing too loud would give me away. When I got back, I noticed I had a missed call from her, then another, and then a text. Lorna, please, just tell me where you are. I'm scared. I'm sorry. I'll do anything, anything. That word used to mean something. Now it sounded like a generic offering you give when you run out of real things to say. I didn't reply. I needed space. I needed to understand what the silence around me felt like without her constantly filling it with half-truths. Later that evening, I walked to the gas station across the street. I bought a notebook and a cheap pen. I didn't even know why at first, but when I got back to the room, I started writing. Not poetry, not letters, just thoughts, questions, things I couldn't say out loud without unraveling. I wrote about the night we first moved in together, about how she cried because she thought love like ours didn't survive real life. I wrote about the first time I noticed her drifting away, and how I convinced myself it was just stress, or work, or hormones. I wrote about how betrayal doesn't always look like lipstick on a collar. Sometimes it sounds like laughter at a rooftop bar. Sometimes it's a voicemail with a whisper. By the time I stopped writing, it was nearly midnight. My phone buzzed again. Lorna, you're really not coming home? Still, I didn't reply, because I was beginning to understand something that terrified me. It wasn't just her I didn't trust anymore. It was me, the version of me that allowed all of this to happen. The man who had ignored 1,000 red flags because he was too afraid of starting over. I had become passive in my own life, a passenger in my own marriage. I didn't just lose her, I had lost myself a long time ago. And now, sitting in a dim hotel room under buzzing lights, I realized the one thing I feared more than losing her was going back. I didn't check out the next morning. I stayed one more night, then another. Not because I was waiting for her to come find me. Not because I wanted her to beg. I stayed because, for the first time in years, I was learning to sit with myself. No distractions, no pretending, just silence and the version of me I had neglected while trying to hold a crumbling marriage together with duct tape and loyalty. On the fourth morning, I packed my things without shaking. I didn't rush. I folded my clothes slowly, zipped the duffel bag, and glanced once more at the little desk where my notebook still sat. I had filled 20 pages by then, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Honest reflections, some painful, some sobering, and a few that even made me smile. The last thing I wrote was this: I stayed longer than I should have, but I'm leaving exactly when I need to. When I got back to the apartment, it was quiet. She wasn't there, just a note on the kitchen table. I'm at my sister's. I didn't want to pressure you. I love you. I hope that still matters. I set my bag down, looked around. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't. I walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out the box, the same one I had placed at the rooftop party. I added one last thing to it. Not a ring, not a goodbye letter, just a photo, one of her and me from 5 years ago, laughing on a park bench. I wrote a single line on the back. I still want to remember this version of us, just not live inside it. And then I sealed the box shut, placed it back on the kitchen table, and walked out. But this time, I didn't leave with pain clawing at my back. I wasn't running, I wasn't broken, I was done. And oddly, it felt like peace. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. I simply chose myself, finally. And that felt more radical than any revenge, more powerful than any angry outburst. A few months have passed. I moved into a small place across town. I kept the notebook. I even started therapy. I'm still quiet, still introverted, still the man who overthinks before speaking. But I'm no longer the man who lets someone else define his worth. Lorna reached out once or twice. I wished her well, honestly. I hope she finds whatever version of happiness she's chasing. But I won't be waiting for it. As for me, I'm building something new. Not just a life, a self. Someone who won't need a rooftop or a box next time. Someone who leaves long before the light starts to dim. Thank you for following this journey here on Reddit Confessions. Now, it's your turn. Have you ever left something or someone behind that no longer saw your worth? Tell us in the comments about a moment when you chose peace over pain. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real confessions just like this.